Hello, and thank you for joining us. We're going to be starting in just a moment. We're just giving everyone a chance to log in. Thanks. Hello, and thank you for joining us. We'll be starting the presentation in just a minute. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in. Thank you. Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the Office and Windows Support Policy Revisions webinar by Miro Consulting. A little bit about us here at Miro before we begin. My name is Sean Donahue, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Miro Consulting. Joining me today is Miro Consulting's Director of Technical Services, Tim Hegedus. If you have any questions during the broadcast, please use the question box in your webinar control panel, and we will answer them at the end of the session. Your questions are only visible to us, the presenters. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly explain who Miro is. We specialize in software audit advisory, cloud migrations, contract negotiation, license optimization, and license management for Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, and Adobe. Since 2000, Miro has helped hundreds of clients worldwide to optimize their total cost of ownership and has overseen over 1.5 billion in licensing transactions. With that said, we're going to segue over to Tim to begin our webinar. Tim, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Sean, and welcome everyone once again. Just a little bit in the way of background. Back in August, we had done a preliminary, as it turns out, presentation on the changes that Microsoft is making. Many of you might refer to this as the doomsday changes. So we're here today to provide an update because Microsoft must have received some pushback in any event. Back on September 6th, they announced some revisions. So we took some pains to contact our friends over there in Redmond and to find out exactly what was what. So we have information for you that you can use to plan. This is new information. I'll add a little caution to that and talk about your planning because there are some aspects of it that are very, very important for you to understand as you go into these upgrades and contemplate new changes for your organization. So by way of executive summary, like I said, Microsoft has updated its support timeframes for several products, the ones that are most in use, Office, Windows, Windows Server, etc. It's also introduced something called extended support updates, right? But those could prove costly. We'll talk about those. And then finally, make no mistake about it, Microsoft continues to push its customer base towards its cloud offering. Way back, the goal was 2/3 of their commercial market. Well, they've fallen slightly short of that, but only by a few percentage points. So clearly, Microsoft has attained critical mass in its online services, and it's continuing to push its customer base towards that direction. So let's talk about some of the details, if you don't mind, right? The first, we'll start with Windows 7, okay? Previously, what Microsoft had put out was that it intended to leave extended support in the first quarter of 2020. That's about 15 months from now, 16 months from now. They have updated their position. While they haven't changed that date, in other words, Windows 7 still leaves extended support in the early part of 2020. They have introduced something called Extended Security Updates, or ESUs, right? Now, we'll talk about what those mean in just a second, but in light of Microsoft's intention to move you to their cloud, to the Azure cloud, what they're saying is you can still use Windows 7 in an Azure environment and not concern yourself with the cost that would be extended to you for these security updates. Right? Now, we talk about Office, right? Office is the world's predominant productivity tool. Previously, Microsoft had published that they were cutting off these particular versions of the Office product from Office 365 services at the end of 2020, right about the fourth quarter. Now they're saying that we're going to give you a 3-year reprieve, so that if you're still using Office 2010, 13, or 16, you have a 3-year reprieve. However, going backwards to Windows 7, you still have to apply the ESUs, the extended support updates, to the Windows 7 environment in order to run and be supported by Office 2013, 10, 13, and 16, right? If you are beyond Windows 7 and on to Windows 8 or 8.1, those particular products of Office would be supported through the first quarter of 2023. We're a little far away from that at this juncture. We anticipate something being out there with respect to ESUs, but we haven't gotten any confirmation from Oracle. I'm sorry, I keep saying Oracle. I apologize. We haven't gotten any confirmation from Microsoft yet. When we talk about Windows Server, right, we're actually talking about some down-level versions of the product. I say down-level because according to the Microsoft product lifecycle, they are, first of all, they're in extended support, but even beyond that, they're slated for extended or indefinite support, or what they refer to as sustaining support, following the first quarter of 2020. Yet, many of our clients have indicated that they're still using Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 based on the compatibility information that they're getting from third-party clients. For example, some of our clients in the healthcare vertical use the McKesson software, and they have something called computers on wheels, or colloquially called COWs, that have McKesson software on them. Now, these are network capable, but they're in such demand and in such use where getting them into the bay, so to speak, to upgrade either the McKesson software or the operating system is just very burdensome. So in this particular case, we're still running around with these computers on wheels with what Microsoft would would consider a very down-level version of Windows. So specifically, Microsoft announced in previous times that 2008 and 2008 R2 would leave extended support in the first quarter of 2020. Okay. Well, similar to Windows 7, they haven't changed the date on that, but they have introduced something called extended security updates, right? Just again, like Windows 7, and just like Windows 7, and in a bid to Microsoft, who wants us to move to Azure and wants us to move to the cloud, you can forego those costs by moving this particular implementation to the cloud, to the Azure cloud specifically. Now, that doesn't mean it's free. It means that instead of spending the money on ESU, you're spending at least some of that money on Azure type clouds. So what are these extended security updates, right? Well, they are, as the name implies, security updates that will be made available to enrollees in the program, right? They're for security. Part of this might have to do with the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation that came in force in May in the European Union countries. Many of you may have some organizational structure, maybe even some customers over there, and therefore you are covered, or you need to abide by the local rules that are governed by GDPR. In any event, you might have another reason entirely, your own security policies, just basic good common sense really prevails when it comes to these security updates. So there are some requirements, right? The first is that you can only receive extended security update coverage where software assurance is active. Now, there is a negotiation that might be able to take place with respect to non-updated or non-covered Windows installations. We cannot comment on what exactly that might mean at this juncture, but the idea would be that if you are at on Windows 7, you have a full EA or even a component EA that covers Windows specifically, you have software assurance. That is your first eligibility barrier or obstacle to overcome. The second is really price, right? Now, depending upon when you take out extended security updates, and chances are it's not going to change, but it's a very, very, very costly approach, right? Because ESUs are priced at 75% of the full license cost. 75%. Now, couple these two bullets together, because software assurance on server products such as Windows Server 2008 is 25% of the license price. Couple that with the 75% cost, and if you have effectively repurchased the product, right? That is what the extended security updates are. They are also available for SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2, both of which will leave extended support in July of 2019. So just a couple of things to be aware of. So now let's look ahead a little bit, right? Because we were talking about how certain products will leave extended support and they will leave mainstream support and so on, and therefore become eligible for ESUs. Well, we wanted to kind of capture that idea with a range of products, right? So we'll start with Office and talk about Office 2016, which many of you may be running at this juncture. Be aware that at the end of 2020, that will leave mainstream support. And 2019, version 2019, if you've had that already, it's going to leave mainstream support in the fourth quarter of 2023, right? So these are some plans that you might consider, or some factors that you might consider in your plan, right? Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 leave extended support in the fourth quarter of 2023. That's the same time as the Office 2019, okay? It's hard to believe, if you think about it, that we're already approaching 2019. So 2012 and 2012 R2, which seem to be very prevalent in our clients' base, install base, are actually leaving extended support, not mainstream support. They're already out of mainstream support, but they're leaving extended support. This again is something that you want to incorporate into your planning, right? The Exchange server, right, and the Link server are both the same, right? They leave extended support for their 2010 versions in 2020, and I call it Link rather than Skype because back in 2010 it was in fact Link. So they both of them have their 2010 versions leaving the first quarter of leaving extended support rather in the first quarter of 2020. That asterisk there just refers to hybrid support, which in itself refers to the connectivity between hosted services and on-premise equivalents, right? We're thinking, based on the information that we have, that hybrid support could end at the end of 2020, or in the first quarter of 2020. Then in the second quarter of 2023, the 2013 versions of both Exchange Server and Link Server will leave extended support. Now, just as a kind of a refresher, we wanted to just kind of remind you what is entailed by these various support levels. Okay, so you can see the mainstream support phase covers all these different things. Okay, however, changes to product design as well as complementary support, right? That all ends in extended support. You don't get that any longer, right? When you talk about hot fixes, you can obtain that in extended support, but you need to make sure that you have acquired extended hotfix support, which again is a 4-fee program for the Microsoft products, right? Then we talk about some planning, right? Why is and remember that we started off by saying that this is the crux of your ability to plan, having information readily available to you, right? And the first thing that we want to caution you is that Microsoft kind of silos its environments, right? So Windows, for example, is in the business units, right? As is Office in the business units. However, within that business unit, it is siloed, and the interoperability between those is not coordinated between those silos. So, we gave the example of how Windows 7 required ESUs. Windows 8, on the other hand, remains in extended support and may require ESUs, or perhaps you cannot use it. So this is an example of how the interoperability between these products is not coordinated because, in fact, they are siloed, right? So another example we offer here is Office 365, right? It's released semi-annually, but it may not support some of the older versions of Windows 7, right? Regardless of whether the ESU is applied, it simply may not support the use of Windows 7. So we want to be very, very careful. We want to make sure that we understand the roadmap, this doomsday roadmap, and make sure that our environment is geared and architected in such a way as to not incur any operational interruptions. Of course, Microsoft will tell you, just go to the cloud, right? Of course they'll tell you that, right? They're going to sell you Microsoft 365, which is a combination of Office and Windows client, licensed by user. I should tell you that, licensed by user, and something called EMT, or Enterprise Mobility, EMS rather, Enterprise Mobility and Security. We could talk about that if you so choose in an offline way. The idea being that Microsoft is in fact complicating your planning, complicating it because of the various releases, when they're going to be updated, when they're going to fall into extended support, whether or not extended security updates are available for them. And again, they're distinguished or distinct interoperability capabilities. So Microsoft says that you can do away with all that. You can do away with all those headaches simply by going to the cloud. So some takeaways, right? You want to understand what your current deployments are, right? Office and Windows, obviously. You want to know what your server products are. And if you have any hosted services, or if you're positioned or planning on acquiring hosted services, you want to know what those are as well, especially Office 365, because it, as I said, is the predominant productivity tool around the world. And if you do encounter some interruptions in its operation, then that is going to be very, very adversely affecting your organization. Right? You also want to consider some legacy applications. Right? You know, that recent economic turmoil, maybe not so recent anymore, but it kind of persisted throughout the latter part of the last decade. And it still has some lingering effects. Our experience is during that time, many upgrades, many projects, many initiatives were all put on hold. And when the economy improved, it kind of left IT managers with many, many choices, right? None of them really great choices, but it also exposed, if that's the right word, the decision makers to them and the money people, that the older environments still worked, right? So these choices weren't good to begin with, and they got even worse because now you were kind of stuck with older environments without any money to upgrade them, right? So that's what we mean when we talk about the lingering effects of that economic downturn. So again, we want to consider these legacy applications, right? We want to see how they might be linked to other products. I say Microsoft, but I'm also talking about others as well. And whether or not it's really time to retire them or upgrade them, being mindful, of course, of any industry requirements that you may have, right? as is the case all the time with Microsoft licensing, there is a lot to understand here. And I often ask this question more frequently than in the past, but more so, it's a good idea not to get good at something you're only going to do once. So the idea is that if you're going to go about this planning process, if you're going to go about understanding your current deployments, get some expertise in this area, like from Microsoft itself, or preferably from Miro, and help you along. And I'm sure that will be a decision that you won't regret. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Donahue.
Thanks, Tim. We actually have two questions from the audience, both relating to ESUs. The first question is ESU 75% of the perpetual cost or subscription-based cost also?
It would depend upon your plan. It would be 75% of the perpetual cost or the subscription cost, if that is the type of plan that you have out.
All right, thanks, Tim. We have one more question from the audience. How often will they release the ESUs? Every month?
Every month. If you update the product on a regular basis, you should expect to have about a monthly. The cadence is now twice a month, but the security updates or the security time frame is monthly.
All right, thanks, Tim. That concludes the webinar today, as we have no further questions. Thank you for joining us. If you do have further questions or you'd like to discuss something privately in a one-on-one session, please email us at sales@miroconsulting.com or call us at 732-738-8511 or visit us on the web at miroconsulting.com. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.